Hey, Paul.
Hey Fab,
How's it going?
good. How's it going on your side?
Good. I'm good. This is an interesting topic this week that I helped baptize the
Yes.
4+1 pillars of sales management.
Yeah.
So this is a good one. Um, so this is your theory or your concept that you've invented. So why don't you tell us what like just explain it before diving into these 4+1 pillars. Like explain like what's the background,
Yes.
what's all that about.
Well, thanks for attributing. Thanks for giving me all the credit. But I build on things that have gone before me, right? So I
Everybody
think
does that.
yes, and it's true. So I'm not. I don't think I'm reinventing the wheel here, but there are some concepts that I've added in. But I'm building on prior concepts that were built. So the idea here that we wanted to do is, obviously our podcast is mostly aimed at sales managers. And you and we'd sort of talked about this, I think, 2.5 years ago, but we didn't do it as efficiently back then. And so what I wanted to look at today is really everything that is important to remember at a high level in sales management, and a little bit of what that means tactically as a sales manager when you're dealing with sales reps.
Okay.
So, and I'm talking, and I'm happy you put sales management and not leadership, because it really is sales management. So yes, you do have to have some leadership qualities, but the leadership qualities are encompassed in this 4+1, particularly the +1.
Oh, wow, that's a teaser for the century.
So, so the four are, and I don't think there's a level. There's probably one thing that should come first, and it's motivation. So the first pillar is motivation, and when I say motivation, I mean the motivation of your sales team. So what motivates them? And when I say what motivates them, I don't just mean to make money, but I mean what drives them personally. Why are they working in this position? What are they trying to accomplish? You need to understand what it is that drives your salespeople. If you just assume that it's money, and so let's take some extremes. Let's say some people might be money and cash and commission, other people might be recognition, but usually it's a blend of both. And what I mean by motivation is, what are they trying to do with the money that they might be earning? What are they trying to advance in their career? Are they trying to save for retirement for their children? Are they trying to save for their own retirement? Are they trying to save to buy a house? Are they trying to save to travel? Do they love the fact that they work for your company because you have a green product and it's something that's really important to them? So that's what I mean by motivation. And there are some tools to really get you boosted and kickstarted in the motivation field. And the thing that I believe in the most is doing a dream board. So you do the dream board to understand what motivates those people. It starts a conversation, so that if you're an introvert and they're an introvert, it's done in a workshop, and it's a lot easier to do than just sitting down and having that conversation, which sometimes can be awkward with someone that's new to say, hey, what drives you?
Yeah.
So that's number one.
Cool.
Number two, I would say, and the others, I think, are all together. There's not one more important than the other, although some people will think immediately the one's more important. The other is coaching.
Coaching.
And then you have training, and then you have accountability. And
Those
coaching
are
and
all
training,
separate.
I separate them
Yeah.
because I really don't see them as being the same thing.
Okay.
Training, I believe, is when you're actually showing someone sales skills. And I'm not talking about company training. I'm not talking about product training. I'm not talking about expertise in your product. That I assume is going to happen no matter what. You're always going to train people to sell your product. If you don't, you're stupid. When I talk about training, I mean some sales concepts. So if you've got someone green or something that they haven't known, for example, operationalizing your sales process. Well, some people maybe have never done that or have never experienced that. So you need to train them on how the CRM works and what the uses are. So that's a training. And then you've also got sales training, so soft skills training. But then coaching is the only way that person will take that training and absorb it and turn it into their own behavior. So what do I mean by that? By practicing what you learned in your training and doing role plays and simulations. So now we've got three. So we got motivation, coaching, and training. And then the fourth one is accountability. everything that's related about keeping your reps accountable to what they need to attain. So mostly, let's be honest, mostly accountability is based on actions. So what are the actions that they need to do um, to get the results? But you've got actions and you've got your methodology. So your training and your coaching are going to take care of the methodology, all the interaction, how they do things, and your activity is where you're going to keep them accountable. How many calls are making, emails, how many LinkedIn posts, whatever they need to do. That's all based in accountability. So if you put all these things together, you've got the ingredients to have a lot of success if you do it properly. Now, do you want me to talk about the plus one, or you want to shoot in some comments already?
Let's shoot in some comments. Let's keep the tension going.
Yeah, yeah, the marketing guy.
Oh boy. No, this is true. I mean, obviously, motivation. I think, you know, I believe what you're saying. What I see the biggest pitfall, and I don't know if we're talking about pitfalls, but because of the pillars of sales management, so where the pillar breaks down, what I see the most, again, not a scientific study here, but um, is that a lot of sales leaders, there's two things. A lot of sales leaders still think that they can motivate people to work, right? Which you can't. And as soon as you have kids, you kind of realize that. realize that. Um,
That's funny, Fab. Wait till they're teenagers; it gets even
oh
worse.
man, don't tell me that. Um, and I think the other one is they. I don't know. I don't know how to put the other pitfall. The where the pillar breaks down is, and maybe it's not a motivation thing. Us keep the motivation. Like the biggest child trouble that I see is that they feel that they can motivate their teams, and so and that I feel has, and I like that you put it first because I feel that has repercussions all over. Like, well, I don't want to train them because they're not motivated. I don't want to coach them because again, like I shouldn't have to do this because they're salespeople and they should get motivated. Like it's yeah, I feel that that has a big impact. Is this belief that you can motivate people, like we're not Tony Robbins, and even if I'm sure if you did like some studies on Tony Robbins, the motivation he does is short lived, right? You get out of your sales training, you're all pumped, you're like, yes, do this, and then the weekend rolls around, and then Monday, and you've forgotten everything, right? And
Well, that
um,
and you're right, and but even I actually quite admire Tony Robbins because if you, I've listened to a few of his conversations, and he's not per se motivating you; he's helping you find out what motivates yourself.
okay, fine.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, if you don't have continuous, energy, and that's very true, and that's where the coaching and the role plays and the simulation, that's where you absorb it to make it part of your own thing. Because
Yeah,
you've got, you have to draw, you have to, as an individual salesperson, you have to understand how your work helps you achieve your goals and your objectives, and that's what the motivation is.
yeah, and I mean, you have to understand motivation changes, right? You have a young rep who's single. They just want to show that they're making money, so they buy flashy cars and fancy clothes, and
Well, you
so
have a
you
really
just
bad impression of salespeople, but okay.
no of young people.
Yeah, young people in general. Yeah, okay.
No, but I'm just stereotypical, but and then then they get into serious relationships, and then it changes, right? Then they want to go maybe on nice couple retreats, and they want to maybe buy a condo together, this, and then they have kids, and then like life changes, and obviously when you have kids, your motivations are very different than when you're 22 and out of school, right? And
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
and
So you,
so, yeah, I like this mood board idea. I mean, there's probably others out there. I think for some people, maybe some mood boards might be a bit more difficult, but um, I think I think doing that work to understand their lives and how it's changing and the impact on their motivation, what's motivating them, where are they tapping into, what does this job mean for them, and so on and so forth is like a continuous thing. I mean, obviously not daily, but definitely regular enough, right? a few times a year, once a year, whatever works. But I think you need to be very aware.
Well, that's where I'll challenge you on that one. I think if you do sort of a mood board exercise, or you get to find out what the people's motivations are, and you get that rep to connect the motivation to their success, then it's always on their mind.
Yeah,
Then they know that when they're cold calling on that rainy November morning where they just feel like being in bed, that it's helping them earn cash to pay for their trip to Mexico.
yeah,
It's so it sounds silly,
yeah.
and
The only reason why I am not a huge fan of mood boards, to be honest with you, and maybe it's because I've never sat like with someone like you to like walk me through it, and I've tried to do it myself, is that
we're gonna have to
it's
change that.
it's there's too much of a focus on material things, right? Like I want the fancy car, I want the trip, I want the this, and when after years of trying it out, I finally found my version of the mood board, right? Like what taps into what works for me. Um, so maybe it's just my perception of what mood board.
Well, no, that actually, I'm really happy you bring that up, Fab, because that's a very good point. Is that I particularly recently I did a mood board with a company. I won't mention the name, but I did a mood board with the company, and I saw some things that were really not materialistic. I'll be honest with you, half the mood boards I see always have some materialistics on, because we live in a materialistic society. So house, RSPs, retirement, money for trips, money to send our kids to private school, whatever it might be. And so, yes, it is money related. But I saw one thing and I had a tear in my eye when I saw it. One person put up, I want to give back to my parents because they've done so much for me. I want to be there for them. I want to be able to support them in their retirement years. And so it was more about time for them. It was more about having time to be with their parents. So, and I think that totally belongs on a mood board. And, when you know that about one of your salespeople, well, that's great. I literally had a tear in my eye. I thought it was wonderful. But,
Yeah,
and I agree with you, your mood board should not just be about materialistic things.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
only.
Because like the first mood boards I would do, yeah, I would do the typical things like I put a car that I liked, and I put like a house or a vacation spot. I mean, I don't know. It was a few years ago, so I forget. And to be honest, it did nothing for me. And now, like as you see, as I get more into this and I'm more aware, like I understand it's more. I have more intrinsic motivation needs, and I had to figure out how to transcribe those into visuals. But that's the only thing that sometimes I have with mood boards, is that it
Yeah,
kind of forces
and I
us to
agree with
think.
you. I
Yeah.
agree. I totally agree with you. For example, my mood board, I don't mind sharing. It's the one that I use often. A couple of years ago, I had a motorcycle, very, very materialistic. Just go buy the motorcycle, and then it had fixing the backyard. Again, there's some investment there, but it also had spending time with my family. So
Hmm.
that doesn't cost anything. That was just about spending time with my family, and I have one picture on it, because it's all photos of me helping, well, not me, but someone helping someone else onto the mountain, because a big part of what I do is I enjoy helping my clients move forward. So
Right.
so yeah, I agree with you. That's a good point. So then,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, that's it. And I think from there, let's say mood board exercise it is. I think as a sales leader, you have to help. You have to understand how they feel their job is going to help them,
yes,
right? Like,
yeah,
it's not just about like, I want to buy like a Range Rover or something like that. It's like, well, how is your job going to help you? And like without getting into personal finance and all that, but you have to see that they see the
yeah.
connection
And,
between what
and
they
Brad, let's
want
be
and their
honest,
job.
when you're hiring salespeople and they're earning commission, a lot of them are materialistic. That's why you're hiring them, because you want
Yeah.
them to go out and sell, and they want to make commission. So
Yeah.
sometimes in certain companies, that's what it's about. You're hiring people that want to make money, and that's okay. And that's the other thing I say to people: there's nothing wrong with being someone who's materialistic that wants to make money, as
Right.
long as you remember that your job as a salesperson is to help. And this is where the coaching and the training comes in: is that your job is to help your client achieve their objectives.
Right.
Your job is not about just making your commission. And I don't want to get into what happens in the training, but in the training, if you're truly consultative and you're a good salesperson, yes, you want to make money, but you want to make money because you're helping your clients achieve their objectives. You're
Right.
helping them. You're not just selling them something. you're helping them achieve an objective. Anyways, that's
Yeah.
another.
Well, actually, that's a good transition. Let's talk about the training part.
Sure.
Obviously, I'll put my operational hat on. I think for me, it's um, it's important that training is operationalized, right? I think there has to be a part. It can't just be
Absolutely.
like, hey, it's Friday afternoon on the summer day. Nobody seems to be doing much. Let's go do some training. While having beers or something like that. Like I think there has to
I
be
like
some
I like that
operationalization.
though. Training while having beers. I'm not sure
I know,
how it'll
I know.
work.
I was as I was saying it, I was like, wait, that sounds pretty cool. But um, I think there has to be, whether if you're a smaller company, you might not need to invest in an LMS. If you're a larger company, like some sort of a learning management tool,
Yeah,
making sure that people are on top of it. Obviously, I'm a HubSpot consultant, so using kind of the tools like the playbooks tools that they have to make sure that people have access at have at their disposal. Sorry, the information that they need. I just noticed yesterday that HubSpot launched a new thing, which is like playlists, so you can like show them playlists of like really great calls, like a really great discovery call, and like
really.
just make sure that they have access to the tools that they need at the
I
moment
love
that you
that.
have
That's
them.
an amazing idea. So what you're saying is you could have a playlist of like the best calls to sort of listen to and drive you and motivate. I love that, Fab. That's okay. Anyways,
Yeah, or
we'll talk about that another time. But that's a great
yeah,
idea.
but to me that's where the operation operate. Oh man, the ops for the
Oper-
ops
Operationalization. I know I can't say
the
operationalization.
the ops component to it is to me like training for sure is important. I think it's not to devalue what you do and some of your colleagues do. Like I think it's easy to find training. Like there's a lot of people that can offer it out there. I think
Of
what's
course.
important
Yep.
is that it's built into your tools, it's built into your process, it's built into even your employee evaluations, it's built um, into everything, right? We notice some issues, and then training. It has to be very forward and not an afterthought. And if I can identify like a pitfall or a crack in the pillar, is just not operationalized, right? Like it's forgotten. It's kind of I don't know. I know here in Quebec, companies have to put like what 1 or 2% of their revenue to training. So it's kind of like, we'll just send Paul to like some, sales training, some random thing here and there. Like it's that to me just doesn't work, right? Because then
I,
Paul is just going to find a training in Las Vegas,
yeah,
and
yeah, exactly. And there's something you said that I love, and I like the expression. Is there a crack in your? Are there cracks in your pillars?
yeah,
Because effectively, you're totally right. Is that the one thing that I will say that I think most people do a lot of, but I'm not sure they do it well, is accountability.
mm,
A lot of people, there's built-in accountability, and we'll talk about that. But before we get there, you're right. I totally 100% agree with you that you need to operationalize your training. You're jealous of how well I can say that. Your
yes,
training, your, your training needs to be really done in a way that is specific to help your people move forward. And when I say training, I really mean soft skills, because I know that most people are doing the basic training of product training. So that's very important. But to do it properly, you need to also operationalize the coaching that comes with the training.
mm,
Because
right,
training, you and I both know, even if you watch a video and you're watching someone else, you're seeing someone else do something that you want to absorb. But to truly absorb it, you need to do it. And when I say coaching, is the person, your rep needs to practice. So
mm,
even that practicing, when I talk about role plays and simulations, I think even those should be in your playbooks, in your playlists, and working on those so that you know how to train someone, how to take the training and have them absorb it and make it their own. And that's
mm,
the one thing I would say I think that this is the most lacking, is that people don't do the coaching properly. They'll just say, "Oh, you didn't say this or you didn't say that," which is I think important. Or you said this, that was really good. They might be positive, but really to do it properly, you need to include that coaching aspect, which includes role plays, and simulations.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the really important part of the CRM, which is accountability. But the thing, I was saying before, I think a lot of people do accountability wrong. You tell me if you've seen this, because you've obviously worked with a lot of sales operations, is I think a lot of people say, okay, I want you to do this, that, and I want you to get there, and I want you to achieve these numbers. I'm going to hold you accountable to it, right? That's sort of the old way. Sort of like when you say we're trying to motivate you, I'm going to throw some money at you to motivate them. So it's the same thing with accountability. You should be telling your team to build their own action plan to achieve their success.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who should, you give them the ingredients. You say, here's the flour, here's the water, here, you make the bread. So, you've got cold calls, you've got emails, you've got meetings. You tell me what your action plan is going to be to have success. Obviously, you've got a brand spanking new rep that doesn't know your product. You might be guiding them as well, try this, try that.
Yeah.
But after a couple of months, they're going to present to you their action plan. And how you're going to hold them accountable is you're going to hold them accountable to what they told you they need to achieve.
Yeah.
And then,
I like that. I think I've never seen that happen, right? Like, I think, the accountability is everybody wants to track people on sales activities and all this stuff that they can control, which is fine. I think that's kind of the basic we talked about. Accountability is activities related often, but that it comes from the rep and they're like, okay, and obviously then as a manager, as a leader, you can then, if Johnny comes to you and says like, okay, I think if I could do one call a month, I'll be good. Then you're like, okay, well, you probably need to have that number a bit. But yeah, I like the idea that it comes from them and you're setting objectives on them. I mean, I think some objectives are corporate and like revenue objectives and stuff like that. Like you do have revenue targets.
But exactly. If you say, hey, look, the team, we're 10 reps and there's a corporate objective this year. We need to increase your sales by, 10%. Okay. John, Johnny, George, David, Elsa, Marie, you guys know that we need to. So you guys tell me, what are you going to do? What do you want me to hold you accountable to so that we can achieve that big objective?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's got to be based on, I showed you the slide before we started, on actions and method. If you're just basing it on results, your reps don't control the results. We said this a few times before. They control their actions, their method, but the other ingredient in sales is outside external forces. So
yeah,
when you're keeping them accountable, you got to keep them accountable on things that they control. So if you say to them, if you're only keeping them accountable on dollars and cents, and you're saying, I don't give a crap what you do in actions and method, well, then they're going to throw excuses at you because you don't even know what it is that they're doing for actions and method.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Really good. Yeah.
That's
really all right, Paul. It's time.
It's time. It's time, Fab. Drum roll.
I wish I should go behind the drum set.
Yes, the drum set behind you. I thought you were going to do a drum roll. The plus one pillar is it's emotions. And you're going to say, well, you know this, but people are going to say emotions. What are you talking about? So human beings, and this I took from an academic paper that was written in 2000. I forget the name of the person now. I'll bring it back to you. So there was an academic paper written on people who have, and I'm taking you a little far here for a second, but I'll come back to it. So people who've had damage to their prefrontal cortex, which is the area that controls both emotions and consequently decision making. So what they've noticed is that when people don't have the capacity to feel emotions, they can't have decision making. They can't do any decision making. So in essence, all human beings that do decisions, from brushing your teeth in the morning to deciding what breakfast you're going to have to deciding what you're going to buy, has an emotional factor to it. So you might think as an engineer that you're selling a very rational product, but the buyer or the person making that buying decision, when they engage, there's an emotion attached to that. So why am I saying this in sales management? Well, your salespeople are the same. They're human beings. They have a lot of emotions. You need to be listening, hearing, seeing, and looking out for emotions. And be in active listening mode to be sure that you understand where your people are sitting emotionally. Now, what do I don't mean like if they're in full on crisis or, blissfully happy, but are they understanding themselves what's holding them back? And the best way to do that is in active listening. And as a sales manager, and I'll be honest with you, and you know this from your real life, if you want your children to get involved with them, you need to listen to them. You
Mhm.
need to hear them. If you want your parents to get involved, you need to listen to them. You need to do active listening. You need to ask open-ended questions. If you want your clients to open up to you, you need to ask open-ended questions. Basically, anyone in the world that you want to open up to, they human beings being emotions like to express themselves. So if you ask the proper questions and you're very sincere and honest in listening to what's going on, you will have the success. So what unlocks all of these pillars with all of your people is being in tune, having trying to have a good emotional quotient to be able to listen and hear your people and give them respect. So whether you're finding out their motivations, whether you're coaching them, whether you're keeping them accountable, whether you're training them, those four main pillars. The one that encompasses the whole thing is you have to be capable of not exerting, it's not the right word, but of doing and being in an active listening role and understand your people's emotions to be able to help them achieve what it is they're trying to achieve. Does that make sense? Did I express that properly?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know we talked about it. We talk about it regularly, like online and offline. But so maybe I'm a bit more aware of it than others. Obviously, I think you're right. I think emotions is not what you think about when when you're thinking about sales management. You're probably thinking about quotas and forecasts more than anything else. But um,
I
yeah,
mean,
emotions are so
emotion
important.
and state of mind. It's state of
Yeah,
mind, but a state of mind is an emotional state. So if you're in a comfort level, you're feeling an emotion. It's sort of like a thin emotion. And if you're in blissful, extreme happiness, well, that's a state of emotion. If you're super angry, that's a state. So it's your state of mind. Your state of mind is where you sit in the comfort level with your emotions.
yeah, and if I could maybe give two examples, and let me know if they're relevant or if I'm if I missed the track. But so when I was
I'll
listening
press
to a
the buzzer
podcast,
if you're irrelevant.
I was listening to a podcast by Rick Rubin, who's a famous music producer, and he was interviewing Owen Wilson, an actor, and Owen Wilson was describing how for him to be able to perform, it has to be as low stress as possible. And then Rick Rubin was like, "I'm the same, but I know a lot of people for who it's the opposite. They perform in high stress situations, right? If there's no stress, if there's nobody to be accountable to, they just don't perform as well." And I think that's a bit what you're trying to understand is like you have to understand your reps, right? Some reps, every person is different, and some reps will respond a lot better if it's well now it's June 1st when we're recording this, but let's say it's May 30th and quotas due tomorrow, and their deals are not moving, and they get onto the call, and that's when they make their numbers at the last day of the month because that's where they're motivated by that pressure, for example. But then you can have somebody else who's the reverse, and they can easily make their numbers like the second week of the month because they like when there's no pressure. And I think you need to take the time to understand their state of mind, what drives them, what emotional state drives them, and listen for cues that they're not in their ideal state of mind.
Well, first of all, I love Rick Rubin, and I totally agree with you that understanding it's part of understanding what drives them and motivates them. And if you know that exactly someone works well under stress, well, they may want you to put pressure on
Yeah.
them. And if someone doesn't react well under stress, well, then you may have it. You should have a different approach. But that's all part of the active listening.
Yeah.
That's all part of getting to know what it is that drives them. So absolutely, 100% agree with you.
And here, like the second example I maybe had to help illustrate, and this is more of a live example. I was working at a company, so this was before I was on my own, and I was uh, talking to the sales leader, the VP of sales, about something, and then one of his reps who was traveling called him back because he had called him earlier. So he's like, "Excuse me." He leaves the room and then comes back like maybe 5 minutes later. He's like, "Oh man, this rep was in such a bad mood. But then he tells me, you know what? I know he gets what we now call hangry. He gets hangry. As soon as I heard him get upset about a like minor question, I asked him, I'm like, when did you have supper? When did you have lunch? And he was like, I didn't have time to have his lunch today. He's like, go eat. I'm here
And
all
then we'll
day.
talk.
Go eat. Take some time for yourself. We'll call back afterwards, and it'll be okay. And so that's understanding your emotional state, right? Like if you don't understand the emotional state of your team and don't understand their ins and outs, and obviously it's harder when it's a new team member, right? Because you don't know them yet.
Yeah, you get to know them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then it's like you get to know them, and you give them
That's
space.
another great example, Fab. I think that's a wonderful example, and that's exactly you. If you know the person and you know what makes them tick, it's going to help you a lot more. And the only way to do that is to talk to them and get to know them and understand and take the time to listen.
Yeah,
It's funny because yesterday I was talking to a leader who leads quite a large management team, and some of her people just like to vent. And sometimes you just, as a good leader, you're just listening, you're letting your people vent. They don't necessarily always want you to find a solution. They're not always necessarily them looking for a solution. They just sometimes need to vent a little bit, and that's okay. Again, that's part of understanding the emotions,
yeah,
how they work, and active listening. So it's a plus one, but it's a very, very important plus one.
of course.
And I call it emotions because it's all related to emotions.
Yeah,
you know and I've said this before: if human beings were not emotional beings, or and if we were fully rational, you and I wouldn't have a job. Because our skills would not be necessary in helping them move forward. Well, maybe you'd be a little bit more useful, but I'd be totally useless.
Awesome, Paul. If let me try to summarize this to see if I understood all your points. So the 4+1 pillars of sales management: motivation, understand what motivates your salespeople, and accept that you can't motivate people. You really have to understand what motivates them, and
Yep.
help them understand, or at least you have to understand how their job is helping them achieve what motivates them.
Yep.
Training, not so much the product training, which obviously important, but that's often not forgotten. It's more the sales skills, the hard skills, the soft skills, like hard skills, like how the CRM works, how your sales pipeline works, all that stuff, and the soft skills like asking open-ended questions and all those things. Um, Coaching, which is really helping them execute, and coaching can happen in very informal moments, formal moments. On that note, I would say I'm reading a book right now, which is called The Inner Game of Tennis, which was written in the 70s. And it's obviously by a tennis coach, but it's so applicable to everything. And I think every coach uh, and sales leader in our case should read this. I think there's a lot of good insights in terms of how we try to coach people versus how we should be coaching people. Accountability, it's making sure that the reps are accountable, but not accountable to the actions that you determine are important, but making sure that they're accountable to the actions they feel will help them achieve their objectives.
Yep.
So if they tell you, and I remember I had an account manager at HubSpot that was like, I told them, like, I think if I send 2 LinkedIn messages a day, I'll be able to get enough traction. And every week when we'd have our meeting, he's like, how many how many LinkedIn messages did you send today, or this week, sorry, or last week? And that just helps. I'm the one who came up with my objective, and
Yep.
and he was just helping me stay on top of that.
Yep.
And the big plus one is emotions, because even in the example you gave, right, like emotions is right next to decision making in the brain, and I think when you're not in the right emotional state, you can't make decisions. You can't achieve your objectives. You can't ask open-ended questions. You can't update your CRM. There's so many things you can't do when you're not in the right emotional state. And so, as a leader, you need to understand what drives what the emotions that help that not drive, but maybe I don't know. It's the only word I can come up with. But the emotions that really drive your salespeople, and understanding when they're off, when they're on, and so on and so forth.
Yep. And a little anecdote that a lot of people probably already know, but for those of you that don't know it, I think it was in 1850 or something. Someone was working on a very, very agreeable, nice person was working on the railroad. They got a spike through their forehead, and they thought they were going to die. They didn't die. The person didn't die, but could no longer feel emotions.
Oh man.
But he also literally could no longer decide whether he wanted, if he said, should we turn left or right? He knew could not make any decision. So it was sort of the original, maybe the original case that made people think, hey, we should study this.
Yeah.
And then they studied with a lot more people with lesions and problems with the prefrontal cortex. So it's actually been studied. So it's very interesting. But human beings, we like to say, oh, I'm rational. But think about it just when you're sitting down. You're either, if you're just comfortable, that's an emotional state.
Yeah.
So very interesting. Anyways, close of tangent. Great wrap up. Great summary, Fab. Obviously, you've heard these before because you had a lot of great material. So thanks everyone for tuning in.
Awesome.
To this week's what's the name of our podcast? Ask Great Questions, a sales and RevOps podcast.
All right, Paul. This is fun. Talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Talk to you soon. Ciao, everyone. Bye bye.